Hello, everybody. Anthony Aniano here from RotoBaller Radio and RotoBaller.com with the Week 6 sleeper and value plays for your fantasy football season. We'll start at the quarterback position with Jimmy Garoppolo of the 49ers on the road against the Atlanta Falcons. Garoppolo with 5 touchdown passes in his last 4 games, including 2 touchdowns last week, averaging 14.7 points per game in a DraftKings format. Good price on DraftKings at $5,500 if you want to do a little San Francisco stack against this Atlanta secondary. Atlanta's defense, not good. We know this. They've allowed the fourth most yards, passing yards this season in the league with 278.2 passing yards per game. They've allowed the 10th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks at 22.5. 8 passing touchdowns allowed in 5 games, plus an additional 1 rushing touchdown. So 9 total touchdowns allowed by the Atlanta defense to opposing quarterbacks. At the running back position, Eno Benjamin is my first running back to mention. Now, injury dependent. If James Conner plays, we pivot out of Eno Benjamin. But if Conner is out and he's still not practicing, Eno Benjamin against the Seahawks defense is a DraftKings steal at $4,600. Averaging 8.3 fantasy points per game, even in a backup role, including over 14 fantasy points last week after Conner went out with the rib injury. Seattle is allowing the most rushing yards per game on the season in the league at 170.2 yards per game. They're allowing 29.2 points per game, fantasy points per game in a PPR format to opposing running backs. 5 total touchdowns and 5.6 running back receptions per game. At the second running back position, take a look at J.K. Dobbins of the Ravens. Not really a sleeper, but asked about him all the time. I get questions on Twitter, on different shows, whatever it may be. J.K. Dobbins against the New York Giants. $5,500 on DraftKings, averaging 10.9 points per game. Granted, 2 weeks ago he had that big 2-touchdown performance, which skewed his average a little bit. But nonetheless, the Giants do give up rushing yards. 7th most in the league, in fact, at 131.6 rushing yards per game. Okay, don't give up a ton of fantasy points necessarily, but rushing yards will be there for both Lamar Jackson and J.K. Dobbins. At the wide receiver position, we'll go back to the 49ers, along with Deebo Samuel, obviously. We'll take a look at Brandon Ayuk against that Atlanta defense. He's got 24 targets in his last 4 games, averaging 6 targets per game. He's $5,700 on DraftKings, averaging just under 10 points per game in that format. And again, I remind you, Atlanta allowing the 4th most passing yards per game, 278.2. They've allowed 6 touchdowns to wide receivers on the season, and 9 wide receivers this year have already scored 10 or more fantasy points. My second wide receiver on the sleeper and value playlist is Rondale Moore of the Arizona Cardinals against the Seattle Seahawks. I expect this Cardinals-Seahawks game to be high scoring as both defenses have been lagging this year. Rondale Moore is only $4,200 on DraftKings, yet he's averaging 8.4 fantasy points per game, and he's got 13 targets with 10 receptions over his last 2. Seattle's defense is allowing just under 260 passing yards per game, and they have allowed 7 wide receivers with 10 or more PPR fantasy points. My sleeper value play at the tight end position, another tight end I get a lot of questions on, and that would be David Njoku. Should be rostered, obviously, everywhere. Should be used everywhere, yet people have built up enough tight end, maybe depth, when they added Njoku off the waiver wire early, that he's not necessarily a must-start every week. This week against New England, I take advantage of the Patriot defense in terms of defending against the tight end. Okay, even though the Patriots only allow 211 passing yards a game, they do allow 13.4 fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends. They've allowed the second most tight end touchdowns on the season in the league, with 5 touchdowns through 5 games to opposing tight ends. Njoku is 4,000 on DraftKings and averaging 11.5 fantasy points per game on DraftKings. Over his last 3 games, 20 receptions on 23 targets with 70 or more receiving yards in each of those 3 games. Some other players, some honorable mentions, as you would say, to the list. Quarterback, Daniel Jones against that Ravens secondary. We know he could throw. Anybody can throw on them the way they've been playing. At the running back position, value on DraftKings includes Kenneth Walker against the Arizona Cardinals and Cam Akers. Take a look at Akers against the Carolina Panthers. At the wide receiver position, some honorable mentions include Alec Pierce of the Indianapolis Colts against the Jacksonville Jaguars and Isaiah McKenzie of the Buffalo Bills against the Kansas City Chiefs. Should be a fun, high-scoring affair there where all Buffalo wide receivers get involved as long as McKenzie is back on the field after missing last week because of a concussion. And at the tight end position, honorable mention, Evan Ingram of the Jacksonville Jaguars is a terrific price going up against the Indianapolis Colts. So to recap, ladies and gentlemen, the Week 6 sleeper and value plays: quarterback Jimmy Garoppolo, running backs are Eno Benjamin and J.K. Dobbins. At the wide receiver position, Brandon Ayuk and Rondell Moore. And my sleeper value play at tight end, David Njoku, should be in all your lineups for this week. Give me a follow on Twitter at Aniano Fantasy. Head over to RotoBaller.com. Sign up for the premium package right now using the promotional code ACES. Save yourself an additional 10% at discount. Take advantage of the lineup optimizers, matchup ratings, and the team sync tools. Like and subscribe right here to the RotoBaller YouTube channel and get the winning edge to help you the rest of your fantasy football season. Good luck in Week 6, and we'll see you next time right here on RotoBaller Radio.